What's up guys, welcome to the first of many paint tutorials I'm going to be doing for you. This is the Chaos Space Marines Maulerfiend. This is already pre-built and primed in black because I wanted to game with it ages ago and never got around to painting it. I would normally paint everything in pieces and then assemble at the end. And I wouldn't prime in black what I'm doing now. Right now I'm using Vallejo Model Air Rust to put on the 3D effect for the layer of rust later on. But I would normally just do it straight onto the grey plastic that you get with the model. I wouldn't prime it black first, there's no need to. So just prime with Vallejo Model Air Rust. The Maulerfiend was then blasted with some really cheap hairspray I got from Asda. I think if you're in the States, I'm pretty sure Asda's owned by Walmart. I think I picked up this kind of hairspray for 38p. So blast it with the hairspray and that'll form a nice solid hard coverage over the rust. So when you're doing the rust effect later, you won't damage and go through to the rust and damage the rust. The Maulerfiend was then primed black as normal. I'm really sorry about how dark that was. It was going dark outside. All of the armour was then primed with Castellan green, which is the new range of Citadel colours. I can't remember what it was, or if there was one before, what it used to be called. But it's a really good earthy, murky, mucky green. Perfect for the Death Guard as a base coat, works really well. Once that was all dry, the next layer that was applied was excuse me, was Citadel Deathworld Forest. This is a bit more browny. It's a nice next step up, works well. I thought I'd say as well, all the Citadel paints are far too thick for the airbrush right away, as I'm sure you probably know. They're all thin with Vallejo thinner to get them to consistency. If you can imagine semi-skim milk, that's what you're looking for, and then they should have flown nice and freely through the airbrush, no problem. Yeah, I'm sorry about parts like this in the video. My placement of the model into the camera is really bad at times. It's the first video, I'm still trying to get to grips with trying to do the work while having a camera. Once the Deathworld Forest was dry, the next layer of green was Strachan green. The final highlight to the armour was Nurgling green. Go easy on this because if you put too much on it can really ruin all of your hard work getting all the greens nice and layered and nice and highlighted. It's quite strong, so be careful on it and go easy on it. The next step was painting the flesh, and the base coat for that was done with Vallejo Model Air Armour Brown. The first highlight on the flesh was Vallejo Model Air Khaki Brown. The final highlight on the flesh was made with Vallejo Model Air Light Brown. The next step was to start working on the metallics. I like bolt gun metal from Citadel, but it doesn't reflect enough for me, so I make my own from black metal and steel, which are both Vallejo Model Air paints, but they work absolutely fine if you just paint them on. So if you paint some bolt gun metal and then come up with a mixture between those two paints that looks similar next to it, you will get a much more reflective bolt gun metal. Essentially, it looks a lot nicer. Now most of the major parts of the model are done, it's time to start working on a bit of the detail. The teeth were base coated with Citadel's Rakarth flesh. The teeth were then highlighted with Vallejo Game Colour Off-White. Time to start work on the eyes, and they were base coated with Vallejo Game Colour Charred Brown. At this point I also painted the weird lighty, fiery, demony hot things with the same, I painted them exactly the same way I painted the eyes, so they were base coated with charred brown as well. The next step on the eyes and the demon engine, I guess it is, was a coat of Mephiston red. The next step on the eyes and the demon engine was painting them with Citadel's blazing orange. The final step on the eyes and the demon engine was doing a final thin highlight of golden yellow. After all those layers were allowed to really dry, the next step was using Tamiya's clear orange. This stuff's great, it works like a glaze. It will tie all of your highlights together and make the orange really burn. The next step is coating the armour in water. This will seep through the paint and get down towards where you sprayed the hairspray. This will allow you to peel off the paint with something sharp like a toothpick and scrape away some of the paint to reveal the rust underneath to give you that 3D rust effect that looks so awesome. After all the scratch work was done, the next step was to coat it in Satin Varnish. I used Vallejo Satin Varnish ready for the oil washes. I mixed up a black oil wash using Windsor & Newton's lamp black with just normal white spirits. The oil wash was then applied to the majority of the metallic areas, not all of them. I didn't put it on the trim because I wanted a little bit of variation for the steel to pop a little bit more in certain places, so I didn't put it on everything, but anything with deep recesses where it will show up real nice. The next step was taking a cotton bud and dipping it in the white spirit and clearing away some of that excess oil paint that you use for your oil wash, because you will dump it on and it will look so much better if you just spend the time just removing it with a cotton bud and some white spirit, and it'll look loads better, as you'll see in the video in a minute. The next step was applying a Vandyke brown oil wash on some of the flesh parts. I didn't put it on all of it, just certain parts with deep recesses, just to add a bit more definition back to it. This part is by far the most upsetting of the whole model Death Guard painting process. That paint job that you just done that looks awesome and took you a long time, you've got to dump a load of weathering pigment on it to make it look old and nasty and gross. It will look loads better in the end, but it's quite upsetting when you've got to dump all that on when you just spent a long time on a paint job. But for this I use Vallejo pigments, and the first one I used on the armour was Vallejo Burnt Umber. Next was watering down dark red ochre, which is another Vallejo pigment, to like a wash consistency, and dumping it all over the pipes, all over the tendrils. When this dries, as long as you use water, you can then brush away some of the pigment, and it gives it a bit more of a random, realistic look. So I didn't use any kind of medium to hold this down. This was just water, and then flicked a little bit of it away. Just make it look a bit more variation, because there's going to be a lot of rust on this thing. The next step was to load up the exhausts with, I used Vallejo Matte Medium. This was just, it basically sets the pigments onto your model, so it acts like a glue. And then literally loaded up with the same pigment that we used before. I think that was the dark red ochre. Just slathered it on, loads and loads of it. And all over both engines, and then let it dry completely, and then there's another layer applied. The next step was applying another layer of rust onto the exhausts. I used the Vallejo Pigment Burnt Sienna. I did it on areas where I thought might get a little bit more, if it was raining, a bit more rain on it, a little bit more light on it, just to corrode it a little bit more. So just on the top bits and random parts on the model. I also started to almost look like the rust is spreading onto the armour, so there are little bits on the armour down towards the base of the exhausts. Which is, again, a little bit more variation. You can see it now in the picture. This next step now was to apply a coat of satin varnish to the whole model. This all the washes that you put on with Vallejo pigment, they'll all blow away eventually. So this satin varnish will then seal them all to the Mini. The next step was pinning him to the base. I would normally pin it before and paint on corks and paint on different, just on, not all together, but it was just easier to do it this way. So it was pinning to the base. There's a tutorial for the base that I'm also going to load up over the next few days to show you how I did this Nurgle theme base. The next step was to apply a couple more dabs of super glue just on his hand to glue him onto the steel bar thingies that would have been from a building, and on his feet because he's kind of standing at an angle, so it doesn't fit on the base perfectly. So a little bit more super glue just to make sure he's totally fixed on. The next step was to apply, I applied a little bit more, this is optional, I applied a little bit more snow, and I used a little bit less PVA to make it a little bit more powdery, and this was really to hide the pin because there's a little bit showing of it, so I'm going to put some around his feet, layer some on top of the existing snow to just simulate a little bit more drier snowfall really, with the wetter stuff underneath. Just add finishing touches, it's not necessary, just I thought it looked a little bit better. This is the Mini finished. It was an awesome project. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Here's a few photos of it absolutely finished. I hope you guys like this video. I'll be uploading more over the next few weeks. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, if you thought it was crap, if you thought it was good, whatever you thought. I would appreciate the feedback, guys. Thanks very much. Take care. Cheers.